Here are women who, in general, are making the health decisions for their families, and yet the medical industry has so largely shut women out.
I'll be going to the biohacking conferences built for men. There was an opportunity here to do something different. Hi, Schuyler.
Hi, dear.
So we're having our fourth daughter.
Just when I thought my uterus was closed for business.
Well, we won't have to argue about its name. As we've settled on that, there's a quorum around Luminescence.
It's lovely.
That's a lovely name. No, we are launching an event.
It's really exciting.
Just when I thought we would never launch another event.
I know we swore off that. It's like
Yes.
all other addictions. Like just when you think you're done,
Well,
one more event.
we've gone through a lot of therapy and metabolized a lot of trauma from Wanderlust. And although that was an incredibly inspirational, formative time of our lives and our daughters' lives, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. And as usual, you're playing the role of Helen, sailing 1,000 ships. In this case, 2,000 people.
Rowing no boats, just on the prow. I feel so lucky.
All right. So this is really the next chapter in the integration of our creativity in many ways. There's been many chapters in that book, but this is really a new women's summit focused on health and longevity, and you are the MC.
Well, I think it's worth digging into how Wanderlust and all the precursors to this new event came about and how it's been honed to something that is so specifically female.
Mm-hmm.
Because your life has become increasingly feminized over the last 2 decades. But your evolution, you started in a supremely male world, male-dominated world, music industry, and we've slowly lured you into our coven.
Yeah.
But I would say that probably started with your slow integration into Kula and my yoga studio, which of course had plenty of men in it, but was largely a female space, as most yoga scenes are, and it does. And then of course we had 3 daughters, which we didn't have a lot of agency over, but your world has just become increasingly saturated in X chromosomes, and so this feels like the logical next step and the logical fruition of a lot of amazing, powerful, and incredibly game-changing women in your life. So let's
Yeah. Well, why don't we trace back that story a little bit, because my entrance to the world of health really came through you and through Kula. So maybe set the context, if you will, for that enterprise that takes us all the way back to really
early 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah, 22 years ago. Wow. Well, yeah, I kind of somewhat stumbled into the wellness world. My yoga origin story was, of course, that I had a really severe and recurring back pain as a teenager and a young woman, and found yoga, and I think almost everyone who becomes a teacher, an expert, the things that you struggle with, the things that have been the hardest things in your life are always the things that motivate you to learn and then eventually share. So teaching yoga was never my vision, but it was galvanizing because it was so powerful for me. And then the impetus was the World Trade Center, and out of your office, which was 2 blocks from the World Trade Center, we both, felt so galvanized, like the rest of New York, to do something, do anything. And so starting a yoga studio was just a somewhat harebrained scheme to create a community place for healing, for people to come together and be in community when everyone's lives were so fractured. And the fact that it then took on a real life of its own, really did become a community, largely of women, but of New Yorkers to come together and heal and grow and evolve, became such a privilege that it changed the arc of my life. And I left the other things I was doing and dragged you in, maybe kicking and screaming at first. But you brought then a very, I have to say, masculine approach to creating community and creating an event that I would never have done. It really was like the male brain, which was you looking at the wellness world, which was just starting to bubble up and get really exciting and creative and vibrant. You looked at it and you were like, wow, look at that. That's pretty amazing. What could I build? And you built the world's biggest wellness event. So I take no credit for that. I just got to do the creative part.
Just to create more context for people that don't know the story as intimately as we do, just that we were in that tiny little perimeter around Ground Zero, and that was cordoned off for a number of months right after the tragedy of 9/11. And we eventually were able to get into our offices, and our offices were absolutely laden with soot and ash that had blown through the windows.
For a year.
And then the floors above were generally like creative studios and photography studios, and everyone had essentially flown the coop and gone to Brooklyn or Woodstock or whatever. And then you had this, what seemed like a harebrained idea to build a yoga studio virtually at Ground Zero. And, my relationship with that was different and unique because I wasn't a yoga teacher. I was in the music industry, and I had been spending most of my time backstage at big festivals with bands and artists. And so I was really coming at it from sort of a production and operations perspective. And what I witnessed in that little studio, and of course this was before the era of the Tony Studios of Manhattan, the Equinoxes and the Yoga Works and all that stuff. I mean, this was as funky of a yoga studio as you could get, especially in the early days when it was just the one studio in the back.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, and the whistling radiators and the bathroom that was essentially the width of a bread box.
In the studio.
Yeah. But my experience with it was coming upstairs and really being in the tiny little vestibule outside of the main studio. And I would hang with Alexia, right, and Jen. the front desk chars, and watch people come out of class. And most people associated Lower Manhattan with the financial district, and yes, that's true. But actually where we were, it was very, very residential. And there was really a tremendous amount of grief and shock in that period. And, Kula, which of course translates in Sanskrit to intentional community, which was very much your goal, were attracted the denizens of this area, and primarily women. Mm-hmm. And I got to witness the power of what you created there to really heal people's lives and bring people closer together, and just see that experience as people emerged sweaty and open-hearted and open-minded, and see what was possible in that little vestibule. As people put their galoshes back on and whatnot. And that was where, that was incredibly powerful, and yeah, bent the arc of my life as you bent the arc of many other people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of semantic, but it's important. I would only correct you in saying that I really don't feel like I created that. Like it really is like we created that. And yeah, I signed the lease and I had to deal with the Department of Buildings and I had to plunge the toilet because no one else were going to do those things. But
still do.
Still do. But I would say this is true for both of us in our many different endeavors, but it is it's more midwifery than it is surgery. Mm-hmm. And all you do is create the container for something to happen. You create the potential for the we to make the thing, and those things don't always work. It's a timing issue, and it depends on the need. But you're just creating a container, and I think that is that Wanderlust was the same thing, writ much larger for 4,000 people instead of 40 people. Well, and it's that is the hope for this event too, is you throw it out there. I mean, really, it's like you lay the carpet out and you people it with amazing minds, but it's really like the group that comes, and that's the alchemy of it, and that is what keeps it really exciting, because you never know how something's going to go off, because it's all in. It's like making bread. You do it, you make the sourdough starter, and you knead it, and you fold it, and you tamp it down, and then is it going to rise when you put it in the oven? You don't know, and that's the magic part. So,
well, I would say, just to give yourself the credit of that there is a certain essence and skill to being able to create that container, and we've talked about that before, the elements that go into community. But I think that what was striking for me as I was able to sit in this front row seat for Kula was how important community and connection was to people's health. And that has been a thread throughout my entire life since then. I think that was sort of the defining moment, that health for men is often this individual quest for immortality, often punctuated by a fleece vest and a Palo Alto address. But there is this, signature to male longevity and health that feels very individualistic.
Yeah, very
and
linear.
For women, that was very different. And then, of course, I was very enchanted by everything that you'd created there, and you started to lead these retreats to the Osa Peninsula of Costa Rica, which I think it's fair to say it's your favorite place in the world. And I have to honor that for 2 weeks every year and drive the kids around as you abscond to the waves. But I would tag along on a number of those, and it would be, again, generally, 25 to 30 active women,
and
maybe two gay guys and me, and
a few bedraggled husbands who were dragged along, and a couple gay guys.
Yeah, I was definitely in the bedraggled cadre, and but that was another opportunity for me to witness that alchemy that you were creating down there, that container that you created to really instill a tremendous amount of vitality and vibrancy in people's lives. And obviously you were doing all the things: surfing, yoga, meditation, food, but it wasn't also sanctimonious or mawkish. There was a lot of fun. People were hooking up in the bushes and drinking just enough wine to make it fun. And that's really where, as you said, I had an utterly masculine idea of, how do we scale this and make it more accessible and democratize it by putting it somewhere in America and making the price point maybe more accessible and making the Lollapalooza of yoga. And that was, of course, became Wanderlust. And that became just an intensely beautiful, complicated, strange, wicked decade of our lives.
15 years, 12 years. Yeah, 12 years of our lives. Wow.
Yeah. And again, our children were born during this time. And, to honor you, I dutifully delivered 3 X chromosomes.
And I did the rest.
And you did much more than I did. My job was relatively pleasurable, minus, the scooping of excrement out of the bathing tub or whatever.
I never pooped in the birthing tub.
That was just my job. That was just my job.
That was your job.
And,
Jeff was armed with a strainer to be at the ready for errant poops in the birthing tub, and I actually never had to use it.
No, I never had to use it, but it was still traumatizing. But during this whole time, you were educating me about really what it was like to be a woman. You shepherded me, and that's a euphemism, to the midwifery seminar of Ina May Gaskin, who's the world's most famous midwife. And that's not how I usually spent my weekends in my 20s.
You did come a bit kicking and screaming, but you came around.
Yeah, it was like a dozen very pregnant women and me in Lower Manhattan on a second floor somewhere. The Open Center. And just being able to be close to that process. And then, we had our 3 girls at home. And that was your decision. And if there's one piece of advice that I have to men,
leave that decision to the woman.
Yeah, there are very few executive decisions that should be made in a marriage, but that's probably one of them.
For sure. And then, wow. 3 girls through Wanderlust. I think back on the madness of that, like raising 3 young children through the work and the travel of the trajectory of that project is so crazy in retrospect. It was amazing. It was a dream. It was so much fun. It was such a slog. What a lot of schlepping.
Yeah, the very first Wanderlust, you were pregnant with Micah.
No.
Yeah, and you won the Twister competition pregnant. Yeah, I remember because there's a photo.
Oh, that's right. I was. Yeah. Right.
You're like, I remember the Twister competition.
That was 2010.
29.
29. Yes, 2009. Yeah, 2009.
Yeah.
I did win the Twister competition.
Yes.
That's one notch in my belt.
But raising girls in that environment, of this festival of women, really.
Yeah, largely women.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big stew of X chromosomes.
Yes. I lovingly called it my estrogen footprint.
You got to plant a lot of trees. You got to plant so many trees.
There is no offset. Yeah. But I think that was an interesting environment in which to raise kids. Certainly for them to see all of these incredibly powerful women, and it was a lesson that I think we learned all over again. Because we had big name yoga teachers and big name musicians and big name doctors. But again, I think really what the magic of that event, again, was the community connection.
People coming together. We heard it over and over again that this was like Wanderlust became the time when 2 to 8 girlfriends got together annually and had their pilgrimage. Like dudes going to Vegas or on a fishing trip. Like women dropped everything, usually left their kids behind, and created a bubble for 4 or 5 days. Mm-hmm. And it really was. I was often shocked by how meaningful that time was for people. And people left marriages and made commitments and decided to leave jobs and made new projects with each other. The stories we would hear.
The
out of those.
entrepreneurial stories. I mean,
Amazing.
that between classes, two women would meet over a smoothie and
Launch
essentially
something.
start a smoothie
Yeah.
company.
Yeah,
You know,
it really
and-
was. It was humbling to see what can, if you create the opportunity for people to make transformational community, what happens? It's really just like an incredible petri dish.
Yeah, the Hajj of yoga.
Spandex Hajj.
The spandex Hajj. The yeah, and you know, as our children, so as we moved through the gestation period of Wanderlust, you know, our kids were getting older. I mean, they were moving from just, you know, being kids to early adolescence. And for me, as a dad, watching my girls like go into menarche and puberty and their bodies change, and
As I
barreled.
gracefully slipped into menopause.
You said gracefully, I said barreled. No,
As I sweated my way into menopause.
Yeah. There was a distinct soy sauce smell around that time.
Oh,
No,
no.
I barely knew it, candidly, as usual. But this was, yeah, I mean, and this speaks, I think, to the period of life that, well, we're going through now, but many of our contemporaries are going through, where we're caring for children and we're seeing our girls now become, you know, young adults and still some of them in adolescence. And then our parents, you know,
Turning the wheel.
Yeah, getting older and in their 80s.
Many of our friends' parents dying.
Yeah. And, you know, your mom really caring for your dad in many ways. And my mom, you know, with her kind of
Soldiering
soldiering on, but dealing,
Yeah.
you know, with
real
some of the
issues.
conditions of aging. Of, you know, she has a little bit of a tremor, and, you know, she has some thyroid issues, and us being in that in between zone.
Yeah. The liminal space of middle age.
Yeah, and
Holding down and pressing up.
yeah, and of confronting, you know, our own mortality in some ways, just because of that, taking our own health more seriously and more conscientiously, and then, you know, trying to shepherd in our daughters into a sustainable and healthy world. And for me, you know, I'll come home on any particular day, and because our nature is one that is fairly generous, our home has always been the social hub for our girls' lives. So I'll come home, and any particular day there will be 15 to 20 women
And
or
maybe
girls
a few straggling boys.
with
their
little
puffy
mushroom
hair.
haircuts, but rarely. But that's the exception, and that's the milieu that I've grown into middle age with, and it's been in some ways really amazing and fascinating to see all of those different stages of health as applied to girls and women. I mean, we met when I was 17 and you're 18. Our kids are around that age now. And I've seen you move into young adulthood and everything that comes with that, and confronting fears and growing up and taking more responsibility and becoming a mother, and then moving into menopause and taking care of your parents. And it's been, just an amazingly eye-opening experience and a beautiful experience for me to witness that.
Maiden mother crone.
Mm.
Mm. Owning the crone.
Owning the crone. You're owning the crone.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. In a way, it's amazing to me that you're inspired to create an event that is completely female centric. That you don't feel the need to like go make some sort of bro event that's like all about like hyperbaric chambers and eating for 2 hours a day and all, the men who are like trying to hack their way into immortality.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's
instead
been made. It's already been made.
That's true.
Yeah.
And many times over.
Well, and I think that is part of the inspiration, is that, as I had to take my health more seriously, because Wanderlust did end. And
yeah, let's really talk about that. And
yeah.
I think it's so crucial especially how these particular women like came into your life.
Yeah. I mean, you were always my primary educator and muse in many ways, and I learned everything about how to take care of my body from you. And look where it got me. Yeah. I know when
insomniatic, overweight, and
when Wanderlust, came to a relatively abrupt end for me, and I had a somewhat acrimonious exit from it. I spiraled into, just a health nadir, and I've talked about this quite often, but I had all of the, symptoms of chronic disease and metabolic dysfunction, brain fog and chronic fatigue and insomnia and, dad bod and man boobs and all that stuff. Yeah, that was a good time for you too. And then, I got very sick from COVID, and clearly like my immune system was not functional. And then, I was, found out that I had pre-diabetes, kind of borderline diabetes. My blood sugar levels were 125 milligrams per deciliter fasting, which of course, I found out from all my
gadgets,
gadgets,
your manly gadgets.
But it turns out that, this one manly gadget that I wear on my triceps, which is a continuous glucose monitor, led me to meet Casey. Mm-hmm. So this is Dr. Casey Means, who was one of the co-founders of Levels, which is a metabolic health company that made CGMs. And, really through my relationship with her, and then subsequently my relationship with Dr. Sarah Gottfried, another doctor that we've become very, very close with, and you've led retreats with, and you're leading Hot for Hormones retreats. Dr. Mary Pardee is a gastroenterologist here in Los Angeles, and then later Jillian Michaels, who's a weight management and fitness expert, and JJ Virgin, who is all about muscle and body composition. All of these incredible women opened so much unbelievable agency for me.
Yeah, it was really incredible to watch you get unlocked by all of these female experts. And there were some men in the mix for sure. You've been inspired by Will Cole, Mark, Hyman. There's certainly been a few, but largely it's been a cohort of incredible female MDs.
Yeah.
And some nutritionists and fitness experts, but it was kind of, I watched a lot of this, like obviously very intimately, but somewhat from the sidelines. And there were intuitively things that I had been talking about or trying to bring into our house for forever.
Right.
But you didn't really want to hear them from me. In the same way, like your kids are never gonna, our kids never want to learn anything from us, and we watch now over and over as they adopt the things we've been trying to cram down their throats for a couple dozen years. But to some degree, I felt the same way with you. Like I was always preaching about the best way to eat, and I'm starting raw milk co-ops and fermenting and thising and thating and doing the yoga and all of those things. And you had almost like a slight aversion to it because I was pushing it maybe a little too hard. And then you, in your pretty male-brained way, had to go deep down into the science and learn on a cellular level how and why all of this stuff worked in order for you to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be the N of one experiment to see if like I can do this. And then, but interestingly, these women I mean, good thing I'm not a jealous person, because these badass, smart, hot doctors like filtered through our lives one at a time, often staying over. And it was incredible. I mean, they basically like obviously changed you from the inside out on a personal level, but just built up your knowledge base. I mean, you became a sponge to chew up and digest, and then literally like systematize all of these different modalities and made them very much your own. I mean, you're an incredible collator of expertise and information. And anyway, I mean, it's been really fascinating and satisfying and somewhat hilarious to watch from the sidelines.
Well, certainly my male brain is empirically oriented, right? So I would read the primary source data and clinical data and clinical trials, and pour into PubMed, even though like I didn't understand 90% of the words until I understood about 30% of the words.
And I was like, just eat the sauerkraut.
Just eat the sauerkraut. and I will say that all of these doctors, female doctors that I've gotten to learn from, have been so generous. Yeah. And like you said, they will just like come over to your house and hang out and just share knowledge. Yeah. And stay over or whatever. And
in a really low-key female way.
Yeah, it's very different. And of course, I've had the opportunity to interview them for the podcast and to make courses with them and to forge business with them, and that's very gratifying as well, but not nearly as gratifying, candidly, as the personal relationships I've been able to develop with them, and both of us, really. Yeah. I mean,
it's such a privilege, really. Yeah.
And I think even though my entry point to it was more empirical, what I found to be very interesting about many of these really inspirational health experts and doctors is this tenuous, delicate balance between medicine and mysticism, where wellness and health, yes, are based on hormonal health and metabolism and body composition and calories in, calories out, and all of these things. And they are equally based in something else which is more ineffable. Yeah. Some kind of spiritual, personal development, certainly relationships and connection and community. It is just very different what wellness is for women.
Yeah, it's genuinely holistic health. I mean, there's so few female doctors and experts who aren't intuitively looking at their work holistically and extrapolating from the data and from the research to how what you're working on personally radiates out into your family and your community, and how what's happening on a cellular level is also happening on a heart level. And there's just an openness to seeing science as a bridge to deeper understanding and deeper work. And I think women in general just have fewer hang-ups about that. Like we segment less.
Yeah, and there's an openness to new information, which is really at the core of what science needs to be. Yeah. It needs to be humble. It needs really to be more of a method than a product. And this is why when we started to brainstorm and conceive of Luminescence, we were thinking about, physiological health and well-being, but very much around, what is the spiritual component here? What is the emotional regulation component? What is the community component? To create something that is really different and unique. And, we sat at many a table where, we would get into these discussions with some of these doctors and health experts, and we would all be going to, the biohacking conferences and the other, fluorescent lit conference rooms with soggy carpets that were really events that were very much built for men, and that there was an opportunity here to do something different, and really build something really uniquely for women.
Well, it is. I mean, you've talked about this a lot, but it is always startling to look at the data around health and the way women are excluded from the clinical trials and from drug protocols. And here are women who, in general, are making the health decisions for their families, not just for themselves, but also for their families, and are taking care of their children and mostly taking on the role of taking care of their aging parents. And yet the medical industry has so largely shut women out. Yeah. And it does, I mean, it is so satisfying to see this generation of women experts who are coming up and finally opening the aperture, not just for women, clearly, for everyone. And that it does feel like it has so much rich promise for generations to come. And, I thought about this event, and obviously there'll be some men at this event. You'll be allowed to come. I mean, like it's my events with Sarah, the retreats that I do with Sarah. To be honest, when I started leading those retreats, I was a little like, is this a women's retreat? Because I'm not really like a women's only retreat kind of gal. That's not what I'm generally, even though I love spending time primarily with women, I don't really like an exclusionary container. But I was very interested in a hormonal health platform, and we never said men couldn't come, but we just sort of figured it wasn't very interesting for men. The content was clearly more female centric. And we have had one man, one super supportive husband, shout out to Quinn. And it was amazing. I mean, it was so cool. There was 31 women and one guy, and it was not at all awkward. It was just very cool to be in in this big, huge, ooey gooey petri dish of women. And then there was more or less a supporter observer. Mm-hmm. But I found, I guess we've maybe done 4 or 5 of these retreats now, that I really enjoy being in a large group of women, or this is a smaller group of women, but in a really strong group of women, especially around ideas and information and learning, and around health, which is not at all a female issue, but through like this very particular, clear, female-centric lens. And it's really powerful. Mm-hmm. It just is. Like there's something about it that is energizing and transformational in a way that Wanderlust wasn't, because of its clarity.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how the medical industry has typically neglected women, and that's very, very much true, and really unfortunate given the fact that there are many conditions that disproportionately impact women. Yeah. So autoimmune disorders are like 4x, dementia. Particularly like MS, dementia, particularly Alzheimer's. Impacts women way more than men. And then obviously all of the hormonal differences between women and men, and how, we both have to deal with and navigate that.
Birth control.
Especially in middle-age, birth control. So to have a forum that really addresses that is, I think that's a great project and a great way to spend one's life. So I'm thrilled. The other component of putting this new event together that's been really just creative and a lot of fun is reimagining what the actual experience of going to an event is like. And this is something that we both really enjoy, because we like creating space and moving people through space and engineering what that looks like. And this is also goes really to the team at Commune and how we've able to sort of build an event with really a different experience in mind. Typically, a lot of these biohacking events and health events are really in these kind of very stale conference room environments, and
dare I say masculine?
And dare I say it. And we just started to think about, instead of putting people out into different breakout rooms and conference spaces and vendor villages and all of that, is to create like a single container in a more beautiful, and I guess I would call it a not premium is not the right word, but sort of
sumptuous
environment. And so I started really thinking about it more within the theater environment and creating literally like a womb that people could enter. And instead of sort of the bright, bold yang energy, to try to actually curate that yin energy of the night and of Diana and the moon and stars, and really highlight this notion that there are these incredibly bright shining stars that we've talked about in the night sky, but what makes them so powerful is the relationships between them, the constellations that they form. And we just got to have, just the team at Commune got to have a lot of fun playing with that idea of how do you create this kind of yin-like experience. And that's one thing I'm really looking forward to being able to present to people.
It's another birth, for sure.
Another birth.
The gestation of idea and inspiration, and then push it out of your body and you see what happens.
That's right. Well, like I said, this is also fun for me in connection to our personal relationship, because our girls are about to really fly the nest. In fact, we might get a little taste of it next year. And this, of course, will push us into the next stage of what it is to be an adult. But our three girls are really on the cusp of
young womanhood.
And that leaves us with the question of, like, how will we spend the last chapters of our love affair together, and to continue to find creative ways to do that. And this is a good one.
It's a good one. I just had a funny vision. So I don't know if you probably wouldn't remember this, but I had just had Micah, and I was nursing. We were in our very fetid Brooklyn loft, and Micah was a few months old. I was in that rocker. I was breastfeeding her. Everything was milky. And Phoebe was doing that thing where she would run up the stairs and then she'd jump from the upper loft 10 feet and land on the sofa over and over and over again. And Lolly was running around. She was like 2.5, crazy, going cuckoo bananas. And everyone was naked. Not me. I had something on, milk stained. But the girls were, Phoebe was naked. I think Lolly had maybe like a skirt on her head or something. You came home. You had been at the office. And you came home, and of course the apartment was just like ramshackle. Everything was everywhere. Food, toys, me. And you just walked into the chaos of the female space. And Lolly, do you remember this? Hauled herself at you, and she jumped up. She used to like jump up, and she wrapped her legs around you, and you were just like, ah! And you were, Phoebe was jumping, and you were said, "Too many vaginas," and you stormed out of the apartment, and you went, and I don't know what you did. You went and like played pool or something. You like got your dude on somewhere, and you came back, and you had all come down. So I just had this vision of you walking into Luminescence, surrounded by 2,000 women, and you just say too many vaginas.
Yeah. Well,
You got to keep that under wraps.
Yeah, that will not be the tagline that we use,
but it will be.
But I will say the fondest memory I have about that story is the rocker. I loved that rocker.
I love that rocker too. Oh man, those things are so ugly, but they're so comfortable. The nursing rocker.
The nursing rocker.
That's what I'll get you, a nursing rocker in your dotage.
Yeah, and a breast friend.
Yes, a breast friend for you to eat your little snacks off in your nursing rocker. That's in your future, Krasno.
A breast friend, for those people that don't know, is a little like inner tube that wraps around you that velcros in the back, where normally you would put your nursing baby, but I think I would put my laptop. It was not a great look.
No.
But
that's where you put your man boobs.
Yeah, but of course I don't have any vanity left. All right, well.
All right, darling. Well,
thanks.
I'll see you at lunch.
I'll see you at Luminescence, February 1st, Saban Theater, Los Angeles.